The Velthari Dominion had ruled the stars for 10,000 years, and in all that time they had never known defeat, never tasted the bitter ash of failure, never felt the cold grip of fear that other species knew so well when Velthari warships appeared in their skies. Commander Zyvex stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Supremacy, and watched the blue and green planet spin slowly on the view screen before him, thinking how small it looked, how fragile, how utterly unremarkable compared to the great fortress worlds of his empire. What do we know about these creatures? He asked his science officer, a tall female named Desara, who had cataloged over 200 species for the Dominion slave markets. Thera pulled up the data on her console and let out a data and a out sound that might have been a laugh if the Velthari were capable of such things. They call themselves humans, she said, her voice dripping with something close to amusement. And they are perhaps the weakest intelligent species we have ever encountered. Zyvex turned to look at her, his 4 black eyes narrowing with interest as she continued her report. No natural armor on their bodies, no venomous glands, no claws worth mentioning, no ability to regenerate lost limbs, no telepathic powers, no resistance to temperature extremes. The Sara listed off their weaknesses like a merchant counting coins. They require constant intake of water. They must sleep for nearly a third of their lives, and their young remain helpless for years after birth. The bridge crew exchanged glances of disbelief and quiet mockery, wondering how such pathetic creatures had managed to survive long enough to reach the stars at all. Their technology? Zyvex asked. Primitive, Desara replied with a dismissive wave of her clawed hand. Their ships use basic fusion drives and simple kinetic weapons, nothing that could scratch our shields, nothing that could threaten a proper war fleet. Zyvex nodded slowly, already planning the conquest in his mind, already imagining the praise he would receive from the High Council when he delivered a new species for their labor camps. The Velthari had built their empire on the backs of conquered races, using their bodies and minds to fuel the endless expansion of their civilization. And humans would simply become the newest addition to that long list of broken peoples, one of their military forces. Zyvex asked, though he suspected the answer would be as disappointing as everything else. Minimal, Desara confirmed. They have patrol ships and defense platforms around their colonies, but nothing that suggests they have ever faced a real enemy. Nothing that indicates they understand what true war looks like. She paused and pulled up images of human soldiers, small and soft in their environmental suits, carrying weapons that looked like toys compared to Velthari plasma cannons. They have never been tested, she concluded. They have lived in peace for so long that they have forgotten how to fight. If they ever knew at all, Zyvex smiled, or at least made the expression that served as a smile for his species, and turned back to the view screen where the human colony world hung like a ripe fruit waiting to be plucked. The planet was called New Helsinki, a mining outpost on the edge of human territory, home to approximately 300,000 of these soft creatures who had no idea that their lives were about to change forever. The High Council has authorized immediate annexation, Zyvex announced to his crew. We will take this world as a demonstration of our power and a message to the rest of humanity about their place in the new order. The crew responded with sounds of approval, eager to add another conquest to their records, eager to prove once again that the Velthari Dominion was the supreme power in the galaxy. Zyvex ordered the fleet to advance. 40 warships moving in perfect formation toward the unsuspecting planet, their weapons charged and ready, their holds empty and waiting for the slaves they would soon collecting the command center on New Helsinki. A young officer named James noticed something strange on his sensor display. A cluster of contacts that had not been there a moment before, moving toward the planet at speeds that should have been impossible. Governor Vasquez, he called out, his voice carrying a note of concern that made Elena Vasquez look up from her paperwork. We have unknown contacts approaching from the outer system. Elena walked over to his station and looked at the display. Her heart beginning to beat faster as she counted the contacts. 1, 2, 10, 20. 40 ships of a design she had never seen before. Have they responded to hails? She asked. No response on any channel, James replied. They are ignoring all attempts at communication. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. A primal instinct warning her that something terrible was about to happen. That the peace her people had known for generations was about to end. Sound the alarm, she ordered. Get everyone to the shelters and contact Earth Command immediately. The sirens began to wail across New Helsinki, a sound that most colonists had never heard outside of monthly drills. A sound that meant danger was coming and safety was uncertain above the planet. Commander Zyvex watched the tiny defense platforms power up their weapons and a handful of patrol ships move to intercept his fleet. And he felt nothing but contempt for these pathetic creatures, who thought they could stand against the might of the Velthari Dominion. They are actually going to fight. The Zara observed with genuine surprise. I did not think they had it in them. It will make the conquest more entertaining, Zovex replied. Begin the attack. The Velthari fleet opened fire, and the sky above New Helsinki turned to flame. Zivex watched the human defenses crumble with satisfaction, noting how quickly their shields failed, how easily their ships broke apart under concentrated plasma fire, how utterly unprepared they had been for real combat. Humans, he said to no one in particular, the weakest species we have ever conquered. He had no way of knowing how wrong he was. No way of understanding that he had just made the worst mistake in the history of the Velthari Dominion. No way of seeing the storm that was gathering in the darkness of space, because humanity had been watching, and humanity had been waiting. And humanity was about to teach the Velthari a lesson they would never forget. The humans were not weak, they had simply never had a reason to show the galaxy what they truly were until now. The first hour of the attack on New Helsinki was nothing short of a massacre. A one-sided slaughter that made the Velthari crew laugh and joke about how easy this conquest had turned out to be. Plasma bolts rained down from orbit like hellfire, turning buildings to ash and streets to rivers of molten rock, while the colonists ran screaming toward shelters that had never been designed to withstand this kind of assault. Governor Elena Vasquez crouched in the emergency bunker beneath the Capitol building, surrounded by crying children and wounded civilians, listening to the thunder of explosions above them and wondering if anyone would survive this day. Status report, she demanded, though part of her did not want to hear the answer. Defense grid is gone, her tactical officer replied, blood running down his face from a wound on his scalp. All 6 patrol ships destroyed. Ground forces are being overrun. Casualties are in the thousands and climbing. Elena closed her eyes and tried to steady her breathing, tried to find some reserve of strength that would help her lead these people through the nightmare that had descended upon them. The distress signal? She asked. Transmitted on all frequencies, the communications officer said. A young woman named Sarah, whose hands were shaking so badly she could barely operate her console. Earth Command is acknowledged. Help is on the way. Elena nodded but felt little comfort in those words, knowing that help was hundreds of light years away, knowing that her people would have to survive on their own until reinforcements arrived, knowing that many of them would not live to see rescue come above the dying colony. Commander Zyvex ordered his ground troops to begin their descent. Thousands of Velthari soldiers dropping from troop carriers in armored pods, ready to round up survivors and crush any remaining resistance. Estimated time to full pacification? He asked. 4 hours at most, his tactical officer replied. These humans have no fight left in them. Zivix nodded with satisfaction and turned his attention to other matters, already composing his report to the High Council in his mind, already imagining the rewards he would receive for this swift and decisive victory. He did not notice the subtle change in the fabric of space at the edge of the system, did not see the first flickers of light that signaled incoming ships, did not realize that his comfortable assumptions were about to be shattered 200 light-years away. In a massive space station orbiting Earth, Fleet Admiral Marcus Chen received the distress signal from New Helsinki and felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. He was an old man by human standards, 67 years of age, with gray hair and deep lines on his face that spoke of decades of service and sacrifice. But his eyes were still sharp, and his mind was still quick. "Show me everything," he ordered. And his staff brought up tactical displays that painted a grim picture of the situation. 40 alien warships of unknown design. Technology that appeared to be several centuries ahead of anything humanity had encountered before. A colonial population being slaughtered while their defenders died trying to protect them. Chen studied the data in silence, remembering another colony world, another desperate day. Another time when aliens had come from the darkness and taken everything from him. His daughter had been 7 years old when the raiders attacked Proxima Station. A little girl with her mother's smile and her father's stubborn spirit. And Chun had arrived with the rescue fleet 3 hours too late to save her. He had held what remained of her in his arms and made a promise that day. A promise that he had spent 20 years preparing to keep. A promise that was about to be fulfilled. "Wake the sleeping giants," he said. His voice quiet, but carrying a weight that made everyone in the room stop what they were doing. All of them, his executive officer, a woman named Commander Rodriguez, looked at him with eyes that held equal parts fear and anticipation. "Sir, are you certain?" she asked. "We have never deployed the full fleet before. And if other species see what we have been building, I am certain," Chan interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. "These aliens attacked our people without warning, without provocation, without mercy, and they will learn that humanity does not forgive such things." He stood from his command chair and walked to the main view screen, where the tactical display showed the Velthari fleet sitting fat and happy above New Helsinki, completely unaware of what was coming for them. "For 20 years we have hidden our true strength," Chun said. "We showed the galaxy patrol ships and cargo vessels and research stations, and we let them think that was all we had." He turned to face his officers, and his eyes held a fire that made even the bravest among them want to look away. "Today they learn the truth," he said. "Today they learn what happens when you hurt humanity across the solar system. In hidden shipyards buried beneath moons and asteroids, massive doors began to open for the first time in years. Ships emerged from the darkness. Ships that had never been registered in any database. Ships that were built for a single purpose that humanity had hoped would never be necessary. The HFY Ragnarok led the formation. A dreadnought-class warship 3 kilometers long with weapons that could crack planets and armor that could withstand nuclear fire behind. It came the Nemesis and the Fury and the Unforgiving. Each one a masterpiece of human engineering. Each one designed by engineers who had studied every war in human history and built machines that incorporated every lesson their ancestors had. Learned the 7th Fleet assembled in the shadow of Jupiter. 150 warships that represented humanity's answer to the question that every species eventually asks itself: what will we do when the darkness comes for us? Admiral Chun took his place on the bridge of the Ragnarok and looked at the faces of his crew. Young men and women who had trained their entire lives for a moment they hoped would never come. "New Helsinki is burning," he told them. "Our people are dying while aliens who see us as prey do, as they please with our brothers and sisters." He paused and let his words sink in. Let the anger build in their hearts as it had built in his for 20 long years. "Today we show them what prey can do," he said. "Today we remind the galaxy why humanity survived when so many other species did not. the fleet jumped to FTL, and the stars stretched into lines of light as 150 warships raced toward New Helsinki at speeds that would have seemed impossible. To the arrogant Valkyrie, help was coming, and it would arrive with fire and fury that the galaxy had never seen before. Commander Zyvex was enjoying a meal in his private quarters when the alarms began to scream, a sound so unexpected that he nearly choked on his food before rushing to the bridge. "What is happening?" he demanded as he burst through the doors, his four eyes scanning the tactical displays for any sign of what had triggered the alert. His tactical officer, a veteran named Korax, who had served in 47 conquests, stood frozen at his station with an expression that Zyvex had never seen on a Valkyrie face before. It was fear. Multiple contacts dropping out of FTL at the edge of the system, Korax reported, his voice unsteady in a way that made Zyvex feel suddenly cold. Human ships. But unlike anything in our databases, Zyvex pushed him aside and looked at the display himself. And for a long moment, he simply stared. Unable to process what he was seeing, the human patrol ships they had encountered were small vessels, 50 meters long at most, with minimal weapons and shields that a Valkyrie fighter could overwhelm in seconds. The ships that were now forming a battle line at the edge of the system were not patrol ships. They were monsters. The lead vessel alone was larger than 5 Valkyrie battleships combined. A massive wedge of metal and weapons that seemed to absorb the light around it. And behind it came dozens more ships of similar size and apparent power. "That is impossible," Zyvex whispered. "They were a primitive species with primitive technology. Our scouts confirmed this. Our intelligence confirmed this. Our intelligence was wrong," Desara said from her station, her voice hollow with shock. "They were hiding these ships from us, showing us only what they wanted us to see." Zyvex felt his certainty crumbling like sand beneath a wave. Felt the comfortable assumptions that had guided his attack dissolving into nothing. Felt something he had never experienced in his long career down. "How many ships?" he asked, though part of him did not want to know. 150 confirmed contacts, Korax replied. "All warships, all heavily armed, all moving toward us at speeds our sensors can barely track." Zyvex turned to the main view screen and watched the human fleet approach, trying to understand how he had miscalculated so badly, trying to figure out what the humans really were if they were not the weak creatures his reports had described. The answer came from an unexpected source, from the ship's historian who had been quietly researching human culture in the background. "Commander," the historian said, stepping forward with a datapad clutched in his trembling hands. "I have been studying their historical records, trying to understand them better, and I believe I know what we are facing." "Speak," Zyvex commanded. "Humans are not weak," the historian said. "They only appear weak because they have soft bodies and short lives and fragile forms. But their species has survived for 200,000 years on a world that tried to kill them. Every single day." He pulled up images on the view screen. Images of ancient human conflicts, battles fought with primitive weapons on a scale that made Valkyrie wars look like minor skirmishes. "They call this Verdun," the historian continued. "A single battle where humans fought each other for 10 months over a few kilometers of ground, losing nearly 1 million lives in the process. And neither side surrendered." More images appeared, showing humans fighting in frozen wastelands and burning deserts, in ruined cities and endless jungles, against enemies that outnumbered them and outgunned them and should have destroyed them. "Stalingrad," the historian said. "Thermopylae, Warsaw, Iwo Jima, names that mean nothing to us but everything to them. Places where humans died by the thousands rather than admit defeat." Zyvex watched the images with growing horror, finally beginning to understand the magnitude of his mistake. They did not survive by being strong, the historian concluded. They survived by being stubborn, by refusing to die, by fighting until their last breath, and then fighting some more. And they have spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of war against each other. The historian paused and looked at the approaching human fleet with something that might have been respect. What we are facing, he said, is not a primitive species that got lucky. It is a civilization that was forged in fire and blood, that knows war better than any other species in the galaxy, that has been preparing for this moment since the day they first looked up at the stars and wondered what might be waiting for them. Zivix felt his throat go dry as he turned back to the tactical display, where the human fleet was now close enough for detailed scans. The lead ship had a name painted on its hull in letters large enough to read from Space Ragnarok. What does that mean? Zivix asked the historian, consulted his datapad, and went pale. Or at least as pale as a Valkyrie could go in human mythology, he said quietly. Ragnarok is the end of the world, the final battle where the gods themselves die, the moment when everything burns and nothing survives. Zivix stared at the word painted on that massive hull and understood, finally and completely, that he was not the hunter in this situation. He was the prey. All ships prepare for combat, he ordered, his voice steadier than he felt. We are the Valkyrie Dominion, and we do not flee from anyone. Not even these humans. But even as he gave the order, even as his crew rushed to their battle stations, Zivix could not shake the feeling that he was making another terrible mistake. The humans had named their warship after the end of the world, and they had come to prove that the name was earned on the bridge of the Ragnarok. Admiral Chun watched the Valkyrie fleet scrambling to form a defensive formation and felt nothing but cold. Clear purpose. They are not running, Commander Rodriguez observed. They still think they can win. Chun nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the alien flagship where a commander, whose name he did not know, was about to learn a lesson that humanity had been teaching its enemies for thousands of years. Then we will have to educate them, he said, and gave the order to attack. The battle for New Helsinki began at precisely 1400 hours standard time, and it would be over in less than 60 minutes. Though the Valkyrie did not know this yet as they watched the human fleet close the distance between them, Commander Zivix stood at the center of his bridge and tried to project confidence to his crew, tried to believe that 40 Valkyrie warships could defeat this enemy just as they had defeated so many others before. Open fire when they enter optimal range, he ordered. Concentrate on their lead ship and show these humans what real weapons can do. The Valkyrie fleet unleashed everything they had. Plasma bolts and energy beams and missile swarms that would have reduced any normal opponent to scattered atoms in seconds. The human ships did not slow down. They did not break formation. They did not even try to dodge the Ragnarok. Took the full brunt of the Valkyrie assault directly on its forward shields. And Zivix watched in disbelief as his weapons splashed harmlessly against barriers that should not exist. That could not exist according to everything his people knew about human technology. Increase power to weapons, he screamed. Hit them with everything we have. His gunners obeyed, pouring fire into the approaching human fleet with desperate intensity. But nothing they did seemed to make any difference at all. Their shields are absorbing 98% of our firepower, Korax reported, his voice cracking with barely controlled panic. Commander, our weapons are not working. Before Zivix could respond, the humans fired back. The Ragnarok's main guns were not energy weapons, not plasma cannons, not anything the Valkyrie had seen before. They were railguns. Electromagnetic accelerators that fired solid tungsten slugs at velocities approaching 15% of the speed of light. And when those slugs hit Valkyrie shields, something unexpected happened. The shields failed, not weakened, not stressed, not struggling to compensate. They simply stopped existing as the sheer kinetic energy of the impacts overwhelmed systems that had been designed to handle energy weapons, not physical projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. The first Volturi battleship died in silence, its crew never even understanding what had killed them as a tungsten slug the size of a ground car punched through their reactor and turned the entire vessel into an expanding cloud of plasma and debris. No, Zyvex whispered as he watched the destruction unfold. This cannot be happening, but it was happening. And it was happening fast. The human fleet moved through the Volturi formation like wolves through a flock of sheep, each ship targeting multiple enemies at once. Each shot precise and devastating, and utterly without mercy. Admiral Chun stood on the bridge of the Ragnarok and watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction, noting how the enemy ships were breaking formation, how their coordinated defense was crumbling into chaos as vessel after vessel died around them. Target their engines first, he ordered his gunners. I want them to drift. I want them to watch what happens next. I want them to understand exactly what they have brought upon themselves. His crew obeyed without hesitation, and the nature of the battle changed from a fight into something more like an execution. Volturi ships that might have escaped found themselves crippled and helpless, floating in space while human vessels moved past them to engage the next target, leaving them alive for now but completely at the mercy of an enemy that had shown no mercy. So Farron, the eternal supremacy. Commander Zyvex watched his fleet die and tried to give orders that might save them. But nothing he said made any difference anymore. All ships retreat, he finally commanded, abandoning any pretense of victory. Fall back to the jump point and escape while you can. But the humans had anticipated this, had positioned their ships to cut off every possible escape route, had planned this engagement with a precision that spoke of years of preparation and training. The destroyer Vendetta caught the eternal supremacy as it tried to flee, its engines damaged by a lucky hit from the Ragnarok's secondary batteries. And Zyvex found himself staring at a human warship from a distance of less than 1 kilometer, close enough to see the name painted on its hull, close enough to read the words written beneath it in a human language that his translator rendered as, "We do not forgive. Hail them." Zyvex ordered desperately, "Tell them we surrender. Tell them we will withdraw from human space forever. Tell them anything that might make them stop." His communications officer sent the message, and for a long moment there was only silence from the human ship. Then the response came, not words, not demands, not terms of surrender, just weapons fire that tore through the Eternal Supremacy's remaining shields and ripped open its hull in a dozen places. Below on New Helsinki, Governor Elena Vasquez emerged from her bunker to witness something she would never forget. The sky above her world was filled with fire, but it was not the fire of her cities burning anymore. It was the fire of Volturi ships dying, falling through the atmosphere like shooting stars, breaking apart and scattering across the heavens in trails of light and debris. You watched a piece of alien hull crash into the mountains north of the capital, watched another fragment splash down in the Western Ocean, watched the invaders who had come to enslave her people meet their end in the most spectacular way imaginable around her. Survivors were emerging from shelters all across the colony, looking up at the sky with tears streaming down their faces, unable to believe that they had been saved, unable to process the sudden reversal of fortune that had transformed their certain doom into unlikely survival. Who did this? Someone asked, a young man with burns on his arms and blood on his face. Staring at the destruction above with wide eyes, Elena did not answer immediately. Still watching the last Volturi ships try to escape, still seeing human warships run them down with relentless efficiency. Humanity did this, she finally said. And the word had never sounded so powerful, so meaningful, so terrifying as it did in that moment. Above her, Admiral Chun watched the battle wind down to its inevitable conclusion and allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction when he Valkyrie ships destroyed outright 14. More crippled and drifting 3 attempting to surrender. Their crews begging for mercy through every communication channel. Chun considered their pleas for exactly 1 second before giving his final order. No survivors, he said. And his voice carried no emotion at all. They came here to take our people, to kill our children, to make slaves of everyone on that planet below. And they will answer for those crimes. His officers hesitated for just a moment, long enough for Chun to see their uncertainty, their doubt about whether this was the right thing to do. He did not blame them for their hesitation. They were good people who had never seen real war, never understood what it meant to fight an enemy that would show them no mercy. Do it, he said quietly. And remember this day, because this is what we are. This is what humanity becomes when someone threatens our own. And the galaxy needs to know that there is no forgiveness for those who hurt us. The guns fired and the last Valkyrie ships died in the silence of space. Their final transmissions cut off mid-plea. As human weapons ended their existence, the Battle of New Helsinki was over, and everything had changed. Commander Zyvex was still alive when the human Marines boarded what remained of the Eternal Supremacy. Though he wished more than anything that he had died with the rest of his fleet, he knelt on the ruined bridge of his flagship, surrounded by the bodies of his crew. Emergency lights casting blood-red shadows across the devastation that human weapons had created, and waited for the end that he knew was coming. The Marines who entered were not what he expected. They were small. These humans, shorter than Valkyrie and far less physically imposing. But they moved with a confidence that made Zyvex understand why his people had lost this battle. They were not afraid. They had never been afraid. They were predators wearing the bodies of prey. Wolves who had learned to look like sheep. And Zyvex had been fool enough to believe the disguise. Commander Zyvex, one of the Marines said, reading his name from a translator device. Admiral Chun wishes to speak with you before the end. Zyvex did not resist as they bound his arms and forced him to his feet. Did not struggle as they marched him through corridors filled with the dead and dying. Did not speak as they loaded him onto a shuttle and flew him to the human flagship. He was beyond resistance now, beyond hope, beyond anything except the dull acceptance of a being who knows that everything he believed has been proven wrong. The bridge of the Ragnarok was everything the Eternal Supremacy was not. Clean and orderly and humming with quiet power. Staffed by humans who looked at Zyvex with expressions he could not read. Admiral Chun stood at the center of it all. An old human male with gray hair and eyes that held a depth of pain that Zyvex was only beginning to understand. You attacked our people, Chun said. And his voice was soft, almost gentle, which somehow made it more terrible than any shout could have been. You came to our world and killed our children and planned to make slaves of everyone who survived. Zyvex tried to speak, to explain, to apologize. But Chun raised a hand and silenced him with nothing more than a gesture. I know what you were going to say, Chun continued. You did not know what we were. You thought we were weak. You believed your own intelligence reports that told you humans were easy prey. And none of that matters. He walked closer to Zyvex. Close enough that the Valkyrie commander could see the lines on his face, the scars on his hands. The weight of years and loss that had shaped this man into something harder than any armor. 20 years ago, Chun said, aliens attacked the colony called Proxima Station, killed everyone there, took what they wanted and left the rest to burn. And among the dead was a little girl named Sarah, who had her mother's smile and who called me daddy. His voice did not waver as he spoke, did not break with emotion, did not reveal anything except cold and absolute certainty. I found what was left of her 3 hours after the attack ended, held her in my arms, and made a promise that one day I would make the galaxy understand that humanity is not to be touched, that our children are not to be harmed, that anyone who comes for us will pay a price so terrible that no one will ever try again. Chun turned away from Zyvex and walked to the main view screen, where the wreckage of the Velthari fleet drifted in silent testament to what human rage could accomplish. "Today I kept that promise," he said. "And you are going to help me send a message to the rest of the galaxy about what happened here." Zyvex found his voice at last, a broken whisper that echoed in the quiet of the bridge. "What do you want from me?" Chun did not turn around, did not look at the being who had started this chain of events with his arrogance and his contempt for a species he did not understand. "I want you to go home," Chun said. "I want you to tell your High Council exactly what happened here. Show them the recordings from your ship's database. Let them see how easily we destroyed your fleet. Let them understand that this was just one small portion of our true strength." He finally turned to face Zyvex, and his eyes held something that might have been mercy or might have been the cruelest kind of punishment. "I want them to know that we could have done this at any time, that we chose not to because we hoped we would never have to, that we showed the galaxy, our patrol ships and our research stations because we wanted peace, not because we were weak." Zyvex felt a chill run through him as he began to understand what Chun was doing, what message he was really sending. "And I want them to know," Chun continued, "that if any species ever attacks human territory again, ever harms our people again, ever even thinks about treating us the way you did today, we will not stop with one fleet." He stepped closer to Zyvex, close enough to whisper, close enough that his words felt like a physical weight pressing down on the Velthari commander. "We will burn your worlds to ash," Chun said. "We will hunt down every ship your species has ever built. We will not stop until your civilization exists only in history books and cautionary tales. And we will do it all with the same cold efficiency you saw today." He stepped back and gestured to his Marines. "Take him to a shuttle and send him home. Make sure he has all the recording data. Make sure the Velthari High Council sees everything." As the Marines led Zyvex away, Chun called out one final time. "Tell them something else," he said. "Tell them that humans smile and trade and speak of peace because we choose to, not because we have to. And tell them what happens when someone forces us to choose otherwise." 1 week later, in the Great Council Chamber of the Velthari homeworld, the High Council watched the recordings from the Eternal Supremacy. In complete and utter silence, they saw their fleet destroyed in less than an hour by ships that should not have existed. Watched their warriors die without landing a single effective blow. Heard Commander Zyvex's testimony about what the humans had said and what they had promised to do if provoked. Again, when the recordings ended, the chamber remained silent for a long time. Finally, the eldest council member spoke, his voice heavy with the weight of understanding. "Remove humanity from all expansion charts," he ordered. "They are not prey. They are not targets. They are not to be touched under any circumstances." "But High One," another council member protested, "we cannot simply accept this humiliation. We must respond. We must survive," the elder interrupted. "And we will not survive a war with these humans. You saw what they did with 150 ships. Imagine what they could do with their full fleet. Imagine what they would do if we gave them a real reason to come for us." He stood and walked to the window that overlooked the Velthari capital city. Millions of his people going about their lives, unaware of how close they had come to destruction. "Spread the word to every species we have contact with," he commanded. "Tell them what happened at New Helsinki. Tell them what the humans said. Tell them to stay away from human space and human people and human interests." He paused and turned back to face the council, his expression carrying a fear that the Velthari had not felt in 10,000 years. "Tell them that humans look soft and seem weak and speak of peace," he said. "But when you hurt them, when you touch what they love, When you force them to show what they really are, he looked at the frozen image on the screen. The word Ragnarok painted across a hull 3 kilometers long. A ship named after the end of all things. Everything burns. The word spread across the galaxy in the months that followed, carried by traders and diplomats and survivors who had witnessed human fury, first-hand species that had considered expansion toward human territory quietly, changed their plans, empires that had dismissed humanity as irrelevant, began to treat them with careful respect, and in the darkness between the stars, in hidden shipyards and secret bases that no alien had ever seen, humanity continued to build, continued to prepare, continued to ensure that the next time someone threatened their children, the response would be even more devastating, because humans had learned something in their 10,000 years of warfare, a lesson that they had written in blood on 100 battlefields. Peace was precious, but it was only possible when your enemies feared the alternative, and now the galaxy knew what the alternative looked like. The humans were not weak, they had simply been waiting for a reason to show everyone what they really were, and now, at last, everyone understood.